Welcome to the TAPA webinar. In today's session, Data Intelligence, Preventing Cargo Crime. Let me introduce our speakers we have online today. From PSI, we have Mr. Ramesh. From TAPA, we have our board member, Mr. Silvaraj, as well as our TAPA IIS Working Committee, Mr. Kevin, Mr. Prashant, and Mr. Malik. Last but not least, from TAPA, Mr. Tony Luck, Chairman of TAPA Asia Pacific, who is also our host for today's webinar. Hi, Tony. I shall hand it over to you now.
Crystal, thank you very much for that warm introduction, and good morning and good evening and good afternoon to our listeners, or to our viewers rather. So if we can go to the next slide, I just want to thank our guests for coming on this morning. And look, before I start, and before I hand the session over to the team, look, I just want to quickly cover some of the aspects of TAPA for those listeners who have never heard about us before. So look, TAPA is we're a non-profit organisation. We're actually a supply chain trade association, originally focusing on the security aspect. So 23 years ago, when TAPA was first formed and then replicated in TAPA EMEA and TAPA APAC, they put together a set of global standards, and it was basically for managing warehouses. And look, as time went on, those security professionals developed additional standards, which you can see on your presentation there. Now, look, from that, the committees at the time realized that you couldn't just solve things on your own, not just from standards. Okay, so what they realized is that they needed to share crime intelligence, and that's a massive subject about what we're talking about today, and you'll see some of the benefits that have come from that. But I also realized that we needed to have partnerships, and you'll also hear about how we have those partnerships. And look, when we start looking at the team on the call today, you can see where TAPA has been forging those sort of partnerships. Now, of course, in terms of that partnership comes the exchange of information, and of course that exchange of information is done in a lawful way, where we have an MOU with the authorities. We've learned that's from best practice with London Heathrow, where we had a memorandum of understanding with the Metropolitan Police at Heathrow there to exchange information. It's always done in a lawful and transparent way. And what it does, it means that if we have an agreement in place, when the officer moves on to other duties or something of that nature, it means that we still have that established process in place. And of course, look, hopefully those of you who are TAPA members and those who are not, you would have seen some of our news and events, training organizations. We have a great secretariat team and a great board who are helping to put these articles together and make sure that we try to keep you as fully as informed as possible, especially at the moment with the COVID-19. Okay, let's go to the next slide and get these some panel here. Look, I have to apologize, I haven't got my camera on today, and that's because I'm using my personal Apple laptop, and I don't know why, but the configuration won't put the camera on. So some of the board said that earlier that's a good thing, so the viewers don't have to look at your ugly face, and so thank you for that. So now I'm going to force you to look at theirs, and so if I can just introduce Silva. So Silva is our IIS lead, and also a board member of TAPA. And on this working committee, we also have Kevin. Kevin is working for HP. He's normally based in Singapore, but he's hanging around in Shanghai with COVID. Prashant is our TAPA member. Okay, he's not a board member. He's actually an IIS working party member. And look, don't forget, we encourage the members to get involved in the working parties. And look, it's great for self-learning. That's actually how I started. I got involved in a working party, started to lead the IIS, and eventually ended up chairing the TAPA Asia board. And look, a good friend of mine, Malik, I'm not a great lover of his football team, but he's a great guy. He's been a good friend of mine, and he's been actively involved in the IIS for some years now. Right, so look, we have a great team of experts here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to Silva, and then Silva's going to run the session with the team. So over to you, Silva. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Welcome, everyone. And I think, like many of us here, you see our background. Most of us are in the comfort of our home due to the current situation that we are in. And that's why we also feel that at this current situation, it's important that TAPA, which many of you are members, or those of you who plan to become members, wants to bring to you what the benefits are, and most importantly, what is one of the program that we have in TAPA. And as Tony mentioned, in the early years when TAPA started and all, the intention was to actually work with a lot of law enforcement agencies and also to collaborate with companies as well to understand what is significant and important in your supply chain, especially at the last mile of things. And what we have done so far, and I can share with you some good practice that we have seen in other regions of how reporting actually makes a big difference, and the statistics and data that comes out of it actually creates a very good platform for you in your organization. Here you can see is actually some of those partners that TAPA has been collaborating. Some of it is outside Asia Pacific. Of course, in APEC, we are looking at working closely with more agencies. At the moment, we have the Royal Thai Police and Hong Kong Police Force, but upcoming, we want to actually build our partnership and network with many more agencies that's around. So this is one way that I see as an opportunity for me and my team that you see here to actually bring about a good, strong platform for members to actually come in to understand and report incidents that they are seeing. Yeah. Maybe we go to the next slide, which actually will talk to you, or you can see through this information here. Today, if you want to find out incidents and events that's happening related to cargo theft, a lot of times these are all segregated in all newspapers, articles, and media. And what we see nowadays, due to this latest COVID-19 situation, is issues with regards to fake masks and all coming out in the market, counterfeit products. So what TAPA is trying to do is to actually bring all of this under one platform, and that's where our committee, which was developed many years ago, is now coming back again to bring to you a platform of things. And you might ask yourselves this question: how big is cargo crime in Asia Pacific? Of course, we heard a lot about it in the papers, we see sometimes in the news, but what statistics do we have exactly to know what's happening around Asia? And here you can see this report from BSI that a lot of these things are actually happening, some in very small scales, but some of them are quite large. A lot of times when all these kind of incidents happens, one thing that goes away sometimes is not knowing about how these events took place. And the details, or like what they always say, the devil lies in the details. And these details are actually in the hands of many organizations out there, because they are the ones who are put into this spot or this situation where they have to deal with. So that's why we wanted to have a way, a mechanism where we could actually bring all this data together to understand from people what happens, and this becomes a case study or a learning opportunity for the rest of the companies to learn from here. So if we go to the next slide, we can see basically what IIS is, which is what our committee is taking care of. This is the Incident Information Service. The benefit of this, or the purpose of this, is first of all is to able to bring across information to all companies in this region and in the other regions as well, to know what is happening in Asia. And this also serves as a centralized portal where you can come in as a member to find out information and to know what other companies have done in order for them to come out of this or recover from it. So the whole intention of our IIS is to bring across information and valuable data for you. So this is where you will probably ask yourself, how am I, or how does this thing going to work? And what happens when I input and data? Before I joined TAPA, when I was as a member who signed up for this organization, it's part of my companies that I worked in, I always had this question in my mind: will my incidents that I'm going to report, will this be flagged out, or will this be made public and obvious? Many of us today definitely have an obligation to our organizations where we need to keep data privacy. We do not wish to, or nobody wants to speak about that. So that's where the confidentiality part comes in. So if you saw the previous slide, what it does is when you actually go into TAPA, when you go into the IIS website, when you actually input your incidents are captured. Basically, only the incidents are captured. We do not need the details of what the company is, the organizations are. And our intention is, after capturing all these details, we can actually provide members with at least a quarterly update of what are the kind of incidents that's happening, which gives you an opportunity to actually understand what to look out for, or what the latest trends are in terms of supply chain crime. So if we can move further a bit. So we spoke about that. And you might ask us, what is the success of this? Because as you know, in TAPA, there's 3 regions that's operating. And I would like to share with you the success story in EMEA region of them using IIS. And you can see that a lot of those incidents that they have been doing have actually helped the members, and the numbers have actually increased, which means to say open reporting becomes a culture. People come forward to share what is the issues. And these are also helpful for law enforcement authorities as well, because as I said, in partnership, we can also help to inform these authorities who are also supporting us in some manners and some ways to actually get this right information. So next slide, if you don't mind. Okay. Yeah. So far what we have seen is actually few incidents that has been input inside our TAPA, and I just wanted to share with you 2 case studies. So this was quite a recent one that came in on the 15th of April, and if you can, as you can see, this helps us to segregate what this whole event is and give people an avenue to understand something like this could happen, what was the outcome of it, and how can we prevent this from happening again. So this is one case study that we have. The next case study is also similar, where probably someone who was a bit more thirsty had to go for a drink, and it happened in a manner which actually ended up as a crime. But nevertheless, it's important, and this thing happens on a day-to-day basis. Okay, and these are things and these are events that we want to see that you will, as members, will eventually benefit from. And as I said, the benefit comes from us as well when we start to have that open reporting culture. So this is what
So,
our
Silver,
yes.
in this particular case, as I understand, that was whiskey, right? So they were going for the top of the range drinks, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I think this was on a New Year's Day for India. All right. So
Mm,
14th April is actually the New Year in India. So as I said, it was a joyous occasion, which turned out to become a crime. That's all.
mm,
Okay. So
exactly.
yeah. So moving on. Right now, what we can see is practically the post-COVID situation time. Many countries are now coming back to recovery, and during that difficult period of COVID situation, we did see a lot of supply chain issues that happened. Many of it reported, many of it yet to be reported. So what you're going to see maybe in the next part of today's webinar is some insights from Ramesh, who will be sharing with us what happened during those times. And this actually can kind of give you an avenue to understand what is really important for us, being in IIS, and as a member, how you can actually contribute to IIS. So I think on behalf of my team, what I would like to ask for the members in this call and those who are not members to understand that IIS is going to be a platform that's going to not only be beneficial for just TAPA members, it's also going to be beneficial for a lot of people around. And eventually this would become one data point, one website for you to keep every morning when you get up. When you look at the CNN news, probably the next news that you want to see is what are the TAPA IIS incident reports that has happened today. So to help us to achieve that, I would like to encourage all of you to look at this and start that open reporting culture that I just mentioned. So very nicely with that topic, I think I would like to hand it over back to Tony, and who will introduce Ramesh and bring us through the next part of the webinar. Thanks everyone for your support and attention so far. Tony, all yours.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to reiterate the hard work that you and the team are doing. So looking within TAPA, obviously we have the board of management, and as I explained, Silva runs the IIS team, and these chaps here are leading the charge in terms of that sharing of data. And look, as I said in the chat, the sharing of information is critical, right? And as Silva said, in terms of the confidentiality, and we normally get questions on it, so I wouldn't be surprised if we get another question today on it. But what we have to remember is that you know, TAPA is a organization that has been managing data from Fortune 500 companies since it started over 23 years ago now. So in all of that time, you know, we have not experienced any embarrassing leaks of the data. And look, if you saw, as you saw from the slide, we're not publishing members' names, you know, whether it's Tony Lugg or whether it's Silva, whether it's Malik or somebody else. This is not about scoring points in that respect. This is, as we've quite rightly mentioned, this is about the whole issue impacting the industry, all right? Because the cost of crime is obviously increasing the cost of eventually the cost of the product inside the store or whoever the end user is. So look, in terms of confidentiality, we've not had any issues on that. Now look, before I go over to Ramesh, I just want to see if we're ready for our first poll. It's always good to run these polls on these calls, and look, it helps us with feedback. So I'll pass over to Sam.
Hi everyone, so we will start our first poll. If you have actually heard about TAPA before this webinar, yeah, just go on and key in your answer with just a quick understanding of whether are you a member right now, or have you heard about TAPA? And if you'd like to know more about TAPA, you can always send us an inquiry email. Sure, great. Just give us a few moments for everyone to key in their response. Oh, thank you. There we go. We have our results. So most of us here heard about TAPA. For those of you who have not heard about us, please feel free to give us, drop us an email or give us a call, and you will be able to understand more about IIS and how this will help you and your organization. So moving on, we will have our next poll to find out more about how do you review the risk of your cargo route. That is very crucial. How often do you review the risk? So please also key in your answer there so that our experts, our panelists can understand and share their advice to you during the Q&A session. Okay, there we go. We have our poll results. I'll hand this over to Tony, Silva, and Ramesh.
Okay, thank you. So look, what I'll do, let me let's take the poll results in the Q&A session, and let everybody just have a think about that before we go into answering it. So what I'll do, I'll just come back and ask some of the team some of those issues. Look, do you remember what I said at the beginning in terms of TAPA? You know, one of the things that we do, we have partnerships, and building partnerships is key. And look, I'm pleased to have Ramesh Raj on our webinar today. Look, Ramesh and I have already done a podcast on some of the impacts of pharmaceutical, COVID, etc. And look, what we will do, we will make sure that all of you get access to that podcast as well. And Samantha will send out the locations where you can get that. And look, you can learn so much from listening to these podcasts. They're highly educational, so please do get involved. But so if I can just say good morning to you, Ramesh. How are you today?
Hey, Tony. Good morning. Good morning. All is good and well.
Good, good. So Ramesh represents the Pharmaceutical Security Institute, and I'll let Ramesh just give a quick overview of that. Now, we are not a competing organization. I just want everyone to know, right? Ramesh is focusing on many key areas of the pharmaceutical industry. TAPA is more of a holistic approach to the whole of supply chain. And of course, obviously, it's important, right, that we work together, because there's a lot of sharing of information and data and ideas that we can do and work together to impact the industry. So if we can go to the next slide, I just want to fire some questions to Ramesh today, really looking at some of the issues. So Ramesh, look, here's some of the talking points, but what is the impact of COVID-19 and I suppose post-COVID-19 on the pharmaceutical industry? And look, in terms of, what are the knock-on effects of the supply chains, some of the collaboration issues, partnerships, and, anything that you're doing with government and private industry?
Okay. Hi, everyone, all listeners, and thank you, Tony, for inviting me once again for this webinar to discuss the many real challenges and, the very good set of questions as well, on the issues that we face and what are the issues that we could possibly look at into coming to terms with as the new norm. Talking about the new norm, I am still coming to terms with, being on Zoom and webinars and podcasts. And hopefully, I hope to attain the influencer stage by the time this COVID is yesterday's news. So, and other than that, Tony, I've never seen actually TAPA and PSI as on the as competitors or on the opposite end of the spectrum. But instead, I think both associations actually complement one another.
Correct,
yes. In terms of advancing together, in terms of providing an education, a capacity building, stuff like that, that instead of one organization coming, both of us coming together and reaching out to a far wider audience. I think that was the objective all along since we started communicating.
Correct.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Okay. So let me just jump into the set of questions. As economies around the world, everybody knows this now. Everyone is suffering from the impact of COVID-19, be it businesses who are experiencing losses, people losing their jobs, employment rates going up. Many face challenges, that's never been seen or heard till now. And at this point in time, the pharmaceutical industry is actually taking center stage, rightfully so, during this COVID-19 pandemic. But again, it very much actually depends on the capacity of each and every pharmaceutical company, where they are at this stage in the pandemic, how they are fighting it and how they are combating it. Why I say this is because some of the pharmaceutical companies have donated essential medicines to governments and are working with relevant authorities. And the others are actually, they are playing very quiet contributors, working behind, coming out with vaccines, doing a lot of backdoor research as well, and hopefully coming out with a vaccine at the earliest opportunity. So that's one of the reasons. And of course, this is done on an almost daily basis, which is not made known to the public for very obvious reasons. But with respect to the supply chain itself, the COVID lockdown, has resulted countries all over the world to see a reduction in the supply of essential active pharmaceutical ingredients, the APIs, which in turn results in an equally reduction of supply of much needed medicines. Also, there is a scarcity in manpower because, there are Team A, Team Bs now that's being deployed in the resources. People are working from home more than not, and where it's possible, they are all online like us, trying to carry out their work. And in Singapore itself, it's almost like 80% of the workforce is currently working from home. So this has resulted in a significant slowdown from the time where medicine is being manufactured till the time where consumers actually get their hands on the medication. Again, I'm not talking about counterfeit medications that are readily available. I'm talking about genuine medication for consumers, which much needed for patients. Despite the lockdown, COVID-19 still has not deterred criminals from profiteering. Take, for example, previously I've mentioned in my podcast the findings from Interpol-led operations, the findings from Europol-led operations. But just last weekend, right, there was a theft involving 500,000, 500,000 masks valued at a little more than 400,000 euros that was stolen. So again, criminals, other than on top of counterfeiting, they are heavily involved in theft, illegal diversion. This, I think, would not only apply for pharmaceutical, but I think it across the board as well. Everybody is suffering in silence. So the lockdown
so
also
Ramesh,
yes.
Ramesh, if I could just interject very quickly, we had a webinar with BSI and TT Club. And both organizations reported an increase in, the theft of the personal protection equipment and also the masks. So good point there.
Right, yeah, so unless it's publicized, unless people report it, it goes unnoticed. So at this point in time, yeah. I'm stepping away from the questions that were asked. I want to go back to Silva's, topic on the need and the real urgency for members to come on board and to update the cases that they have faced, because only then the library of information that that TAPA has or PSI has will be built upon. And when it's built upon, it's only then that members and everybody else can benefit from it. If you don't share, we never know. If nobody knows, it goes totally unnoticed. And of course, the only one tends to profit from it or to benefit from it would be the criminals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so coming back to this lockdown situation and stuff, I'm not sure how many of us are really aware, but the actual supply and the movement of cargo has actually gone down by 85%. This is really, really significant. But I'm not only talking about the slowdown in the cargo. I'm now coming to what does it actually mean for the post-COVID? This is where the problem comes in. Very briefly, all the parcels that are currently in storage or in fulfillment centers, once the lockdown eases all over the region, they will start flooding the customs. Customs will see an unprecedented volume of parcels coming in from all over the world. Criminals will apply, take this opportunity to apply their trade and take advantage and start swamping all the counterfeit products. And this could be ranging from counterfeit test kits, COVID vaccines that would be already available by then, and medicines to treat COVID. So this is exactly like what I'm trying to say. We'll start flooding everybody, and there will be a chain reaction from the time where counterfeiters flood the immigration from the customs, and then the unwavering patients who want ready medicines and they get affected by it, and then in the end, the healthcare again suffers for it. So there will be a significant change. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it was interesting you said that, right? Because TAPA was asked for to comment basically on trade compliance, okay, and obviously counterfeit comes along with that. But in terms of the trade compliance, you're right. There will be people who will use this opportunity to sort of leverage off of it, and obviously with the PPE and the counterfeit and trade compliance, it's potentially big issues. And I agree with you, there could be an enormous knock-on effect.
Exactly, and already as it is, even pre-COVID, every year, I keep talking about this as always, every year there are an estimated 300,000 children dying after consuming fake medication. I do not want to think what is the numbers are going to be like post-COVID. Right? So this is a very sad details. All right, so the next is the post-COVID will also see industries embracing digitalization in managing and safeguarding their supply chain. This is also a very prudent approach that supply chain industries will look at. Businesses would want to ensure that they have a better end-to-end oversight to safeguard their products from being counterfeited. We've already discussed about this in depth in the last podcast. But of course, this will make the already complicated supply chain even more complicated. When anything gets more complicated, there's always a tendency for counterfeiters to come in, be it the over-publicized blockchain capacity, how unpenetrable it can be. There can always be a way to such things. Of course, next we will see an increase. This is again post-COVID. We will see an increase in e-commerce activity, and this will continue to see and surge without a doubt. The sale of counterfeit medicines, as well as other merchandises, of course, will continue to be on the increase. And to avoid detection, the purchasers or the syndicates, what they can do is that they can start posting everything in small parcels. There's this big parcels and then small parcels that goes into fulfillment centers. They are broke, and then they flood all over the world, at least for medicines as well. And therein lies the problem. If you are just talking about the Asia Pacific region, it's very wide, and it consists of both developing countries and developed countries. And of course, that's it. We cannot expect the enforcement efforts, the energy, the resources, the allocation, everything to be consistent across the board. This is where law enforcement agencies and governments actually can reach out, take this opportunity to reach out and foster a partnership with private sectors, private industries as well. But COVID-19 will go on to challenge the already time-tested relationship between the governments and private sectors. I think, Tony, you and I both agree on this.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so outfits like, PSI and TAPA have always emphasized, I think we will go on to still, echoing this as well, the need and the urgencies to build a partnership with the various agencies. But you see, the thing is that while PSI has some success in developing countries, the real challenge is actually with the more developed, more advanced countries. Engaging with the law enforcement, it's always been consistently tough. But all said and done, we will, PSI and I think TAPA as well, will continue our efforts working with the various members that we have, and of course with the relevant law enforcement agencies to safeguard public health. I think I've answered most of the questions. Other than going into the details of how syndicates operate, I think that one, we do not want to promote any potential syndicates who are actually listening to us. I think that part of the story, I think we will leave it to the law enforcement.
No, exactly. So, Ramesh, look, thank you very much for that. And I just want to touch on and look, don't forget to ask some of those questions in the questions box, please, if you have any. Look, I just want to sort of talk about that importance. Me and you have had a lot of discussions on this, and look, it's it can't be a one-way street, right? If the members, your members for the PSI and our members for TAPA, look, if we really want to address these issues, right, we have to have that data, and of course, this is the role of this team here to retrieve that data. And then to use it in the best manner. And what we'll do are, during the Q&A, what we'll do, we'll just bring up some of that data and show you the best practice. So when you see the data and how it's rolled up, you'll see that it's in a sort of an informatic graphic point of view. But as Ramesh says, look, when we share that with law enforcement, it's key, right? They can understand some of the issues and understand where some of the priorities lie. So look, if we look at what we'll be doing on these calls going forward, right, and we will alter the time of these calls. to make sure that we can bring some experts in from Europe, so you can hear some of the way the TAPA EMEA has been using this data. But you can see from the infographic put up on the screen here, when you start presenting this data to government officials, they start realizing that organized crime is making a living out of cargo crime. And look, and don't forget that these are just ones that are reported to TAPA and reported to the police. As Malik has said to us a number of times, a lot of the issues, right? And don't forget, Malik only represents one insurance company, but a lot of the issues is that a lot of the losses are under the deductible level, or they can't. The location of the loss cannot be determined, so the police won't accept the crime report. And of course, then where does that data end up? It ends up inside the company as just lost data, and nothing ever happens with it. And what TAPA is saying is, look, put that into our database. The information is dealt with completely confidentially, so you can have a look at the platform. So Sam, I don't know if you can just pull that up in a minute, just to show everyone. Silver showed an example, but we can quickly just flick over to the TAPA Global website, and you can just see where you put that data. Now, when you see that data, you realize that this is not about whether it's company A, company B, company C. This is about us all working as a team to basically share that data. And what I want to try and do in a moment, and I want the panel to be ready for this, please, is that when we looked at that poll result, there were some good figures there. So look, Ramesh, some very insightful sort of information there for the listeners, or the watchers rather. So what I want to do is just can we bring that result of the poll back up, please, Samantha?
Sorry. Can I just go back to the slides, the last one? I think that was a very impressive slide. Just wanted to add just a little bit on that. All right. So, okay. The earlier slide, it's a very beautiful infographic on all the different data as well.
Right.
But, for the listeners as well as our PSI members or TAPA members, regardless, such an information, I think one needs to look at it on a very broad spectrum of it. If you are going to launch a product in another country, if you're going to do business in another country, this kind of information is very, very vital. When you look at the trending in terms of theft, in terms of illegal diversion, in terms of counterfeiting, you can effectively allocate your resources in that region. Instead of wasting lots of money and time and effort, this could be stepping stones as to how you want to channel your energy. So that's something, and I really want to say, don't just take the numbers as for face value. I think everybody who's looking at these numbers need to spin around the idea as to how these numbers can be used and how contributing to these numbers can effectively help them at the later stage as well. Yeah, that's the 2 cents I wanted to just add on.
No, it's a good point. Selva, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, correct. I think it's going to be sounding like I'm repeating it, but the thing is, what we need today is actually the data. We need to know what is happening, so that we actually have all this information to come up with good practices for the industry. And as Ramesh mentioned about pharmaceutical, I am also coming from a pharmaceutical industry, and whatever he said is actually is the truth. And in fact, there's more episodes that we are looking forward to happen in the future, which we do not know yet. But the thing is, there are other industries out there which have got small quantities of products but large values. So pharmaceutical industry comes under that category. Our volumes are small, but our value is large. But there are other industries where the volumes are large, and these volumes sometimes, and the products are sometimes so small, so minute, that you might not even have the opportunity to understand if one box is missing out of a whole pallet. But the thing is, if there is a way of finding that or reporting that, it gives us the information to understand how we can prevent this to make that incident become a pallet loss for the future. So the whole purpose of
yeah, absolutely, Soba, yeah. And look, Malik, as we said, you know, it's a problem, isn't it? It's a problem in the supply chain where you know, the police don't get the report, TAPA doesn't get the report, you don't even see the issue because of the, you know, the fact that it doesn't meet the, you know, deductible. So, you know, what is you know, what would you be saying to TAPA members and anyone really, because you don't have to be a TAPA member to report the data, but what would you be saying to the TAPA members?
Well, again, like everybody's saying, data is important. You need to look at data. You need to look at history, incidents, however small. You can use this data, and with the effort of TAPA to collect and consolidate, then this data become very strong information for all the members.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and that that really reinforces Ramesh's point. So thanks, Malik. So Sam, if we can just bring up the poll results of the risk assessment, and look, I think just that these are very interesting. Okay, so look, for the 20% that don't review, okay, you know, maybe what we could do is look at, you know, have you got the tools to do that? Have you had the training to do that? Okay, and that's what you know, TAPA is trying to do, is to help develop that training going forward for a risk management process. But let me just ask Prashant and Kevin in terms of how often do you do a risk assessment? So look, in terms of the results, you know, you have one that's saying once a quarter, once every year, once every 6 months. So ideally, you know, what sort of advice would you be giving to listeners of how that should be addressed? Let's go to Prashant first.
In an ideal scenario, you take I think it's important. So I think
sorry,
it's
Prashant,
important.
we just couldn't hear you a bit more clearly, please.
Yeah, Prashant, I think there might be some connectivity issues there. Can you, let's come back to Prashant in 1 second. Kevin, can you go ahead?
Okay, so based on our experience, so we will review it at least 2 times a year. So every time we review the contract with the LSP, we have to do the risk assessment. So before we give in the contractor awarded the contractor to the new LSP. So, and then in the middle of the year, so we will have another risk assessment. So in the IFQ and also in the asset the evaluate the service for this LSP. So only in case if we have a serious theft issues, so at that moment, so we will immediately take the actions to review that road for the asset risks level. So meanwhile, if that countries or that regions we have any other cases not related to our companies, but we will still review it. That will be happen only in that countries we have a very serious issue. So maybe it's the economic or the political or the riotous. So based on that kind of information, we will do the assessment to secure the cargoes in that country. So this is our experience.
Yeah, and Kevin, you know, that's a good point, because someone's just asked me a private question saying, it's really picking up what Ramesh said and what you've actually answered. Okay, so, well, you know, what happens if there's a change? What happens, you know, what do you do with the, you know, how do you do that in your risk assessment? And I think you both answered it. Yep, one, you know, if we have that data, It allows us to do the risk assessments. And as you quite rightly said, Kevin, if there's a change in the circumstances of the business, then the risk assessment should also be done. So Samantha, we have another question coming in.
No, that's all we have.
Okay, so we have what advice is being passed to its member during this time with the backlog of products being shipped? Presumably the shipment level, let me just, presumably the reduced shipping levels means a far greater capacity of product being warehoused. Okay, so look, Nick, if I can just take, start to answer that for you. So thanks very much for asking the question, because it is a very good question, right? So at the moment, as you know, there is a lot of backlog inside ports. And look, as Ramesh said, some of the fear is that once the whole supply chain opens up, there are going to be a lot of not only there are going to be a lot of counterfeit issues, the trade compliance problems, but also the insurance companies are predicting, certainly TT Club mentioned on the last webinar, that they expected a lot of crime issues to come up, right, where there have been pilferages either in the warehouse or BSI had reported an increased theft from warehouses. Okay, so obviously that's going to be one problem. Now, in terms of the capacity of the warehouses, there have been some reports sent across to us where the capacity of the warehouses are basically they're bursting at the seams, and of course it means that product has been stored in trailers and in containers, and of course then look, the same fears are coming from that. Had they been stored in a secure environment? What is the process to check that every day? And there is a risk that there's going to be some events there. Now look, every time there's an event there, it does create customs problems. It means that the paperwork has to be redone, as well as the valuation has to be resubmitted. So anybody else want to take up any respond to some of that question at all, please?
Oh, Tony, I think you got the message quite clear. Yeah. I think you've summed it up well.
Yeah, Nick, it's a good question, right? I know it's creating a lot of problems within the in the supply chain. So look, let's Prashant, are you back with us? I know the internet seemed to have dropped when you were talking. Can you just try again, and we'll just get your response on that risk assessment?
Sure. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, that's a bit better. Yeah.
I think basically Kevin answered most of the points that I wanted to say. But just to add to what he mentioned, I think in an ideal scenario, quarterly risk reviews are the most best suited ones. But then that's also a function of how voluminous and the scale that your operations work. In the scenario that we work in, we typically do review twice a year, and that's in line with what Kevin said, because it's also a fact that you have built your own knowledge as to how these routes work. But what is critical, I think it's also when you introduce new routes to also do a physical assessment of how things work in the route that you have planned, especially more so if it's a land route. Because while I know cargo theft through seas, through customs, there are chances of things happening. But I think if you have analyzed what database that TAPA has in the IIS database, you'll see that the land routes are much more vulnerable than anywhere else. And that means whenever you introduce a new route, your risk assessment has to be that much more holistic, much more detailed, and literally have to be planned to the detail. And I think one of the key elements is also to ensure that we have the PSR standards in place. I know in Europe it's picking up very well, but I think in the rest of the world that also needs to be planned and adopted to, which will then help us in assessing these routes going forward, and also the risk assessment that comes with it.
Yeah, Prashant, good point. And look, just for the listeners, that the PSR is the parking security requirements, and look, that's been rolled out through Europe, and as Prashant said, it's been very successful because trucking, ground transportation. You know, Kevin will tell you it's massive in China. It's obviously massive in India. And look, you know, once a truck's out on the road, it's obviously always at risk. So we will provide some more of that data. But what Prashant said is totally correct. I think this is the benefit of the IIS data, is that you can use that data to do the risk assessments, as Silva alluded to at the beginning, and Prashant has reinforced. And look, and Ramesh said it as well, you know, we have the luxury of having that data, and we can only achieve that if we, unless we work together. So I think we have another question coming in, Samantha.
Yes, we have a question from the ground. Would you like to share with us how the Law Enforcement Alliance are supporting IIS and TAPA? And as a member of TAPA, if we are able to also get their support as well?
Yes, certainly. Silva, you want to take that that question? I know Ramesh, you know, but you could explain what you do for your members. Silva, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think for our IIS portion, I think that's a good question, first of all. This is what I said at the start of our presentation, that we are building our resources and our engagement with the law enforcement agencies. And of course, once those things are more formal and in place, you will actually see how companies can actually benefit from it. So right now, today, the question, the biggest question is, are we ready to inform the law enforcement agencies what are the problems our members in TAPA are facing? And for that, are we having data in it? So this is where IIS has to step up, and we have to step up our platform as well, together with you as the members, on how we can leverage from the enforcement agencies. Yeah, and I think this is also quite similar to what Ramesh will also advise us in terms of how they are working together with the law enforcement agencies in the other places as well.
Okay, right. So I think PSI's approach may be just a little different here. In terms of collating of evidence, all right, sometimes it takes different modes here. There are instances where members provide us an incident update of either a theft, illegal diversion, or a counterfeit case, but we don't immediately act on it. What it goes into a data, and similar to IIS, and then we store it for filing. Any action that PSI wants to take is very much dependent on the intention of the member. If the member says, all right, I have an issue in this particular region, and I already have this many cases which we already know, then what we do is that we reach out based on our already existing partnership or collaboration effort with the law enforcement agency, and then we will package everything and then we will give it to them for them to carry out the next course of action. But of course, at that point in time, PSI's role would be to be a face, an introductory medium between the member and the law enforcement agencies, and then we bring them together. This is one aspect of how we go about doing it. The other aspect would be like during this COVID season, pandemic, right? What we do is that we engage the services of vendors in different regions, and then we carry out a global effort. And through this, we have identified maybe about 5,000 websites that are actually selling unapproved counterfeits, medications that are being sold. So what we do now is that we take that finding and then we will give it to the respective law enforcement agencies. We have given it to WCO, we have given it to Europol, Interpol, other local law enforcement agencies, health regulators as well. And then for them to go and review the data that we have given. So what they'll do after that is that they'll review this data, and then if there's anything that they want to bite, they can come back to work with us. But of course, when you trigger an investigation, everything becomes another mode of confidential, and that we don't tap into that. We will allow enforcement agencies to carry out their efforts as to how they're supposed to go about doing it. And as and when they need any other assistance, we are always there to assist them. This is how we go about doing it.
Yeah, Ramesh, look, it's not too dissimilar to us, and look, it goes into the next question. Well, yeah, from Lauren here. So, you know, do we see clusters of incidents in certain areas, where we can do specific projects and or engagements with LEAs? So the answer is yes. So as Ramesh said, look, he has a very similar approach on a number of occasions. Right? TAPA has been aware of certain information. And look, as Ramesh said, look, we've acted as the interface between the member and law enforcement. You know, sometimes when you go to law enforcement as an individual company, and this even happened in the UK, the organisation in question didn't get the full response they required. Look, they eventually they and another came to TAPA, and then would you believe it, by the time we did our research, we had something like 30, 40 companies involved, and look, TAPA represented those companies, and we actually went to the Department of Trade and Industry and got their buy-in to address the issue. And of course, look, you know, once the DTI was involved, and then it was a green light really for the police to actually get involved. So it's a good question, Lauren. And look, Lauren, I think what we should do, Samantha, if you can just make a note of this, on Lauren's question, we should show that case study on the next webinar. All right, so look, guys, we're coming up to the hour now. And
Wow.
look, the panelists
Time flies
are
when you're
looking
having
worn
fun.
yeah, the panelists are looking worn out and tired now. So let's
Really?
yeah, let's let them get back to their day job, etc. But look, thank you very much for attending. Let me pass you back to Crystal for the closing.
Thank you. Stay safe, stay apart, stay sane.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you all of our speakers. Thank you for joining the webinar on data intelligence, preventing cargo crime. We hope that you enjoyed the webinar and the question and answer session. If you have any questions and feedback, please feel free to contact TAPA or Ramesh from PSI. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar sessions. Goodbye.